Hello friends, so let us continue our discussion on the defects that we observe in a crystalline material. Now the crystalline material, if you could recollect, is characterized by the long range arrangement of the atoms, and any disturbance in the long range arrangement of the atoms or any imperfections in the long range arrangement of the atoms, we refer to them as the defects. And depending on how far these imperfections are pronounced, we categorize these defects into point defects, line defects, surface and volume defects. Now, in the previous lecture, we saw that in the context of the mechanical behavior of the material, particularly the plastic deformation, when you define the plastic deformation as the movement of atoms from one stable position or the equilibrium position to another stable position, when you define just the plastic deformation is nothing but movement of atom from one point to another point, both these points being a stable point, like something like this, wherein you have a regular arrangement of the atoms and your atoms move from position 1 to position 2. When you define the plastic deformation as the atoms moving from position 1 to position 2, both these are stable position, then there is a significant disparity in the stress that is required to bring about this shift in the position of the atoms and the stress that you see in the physical world that is required to bring about the plastic deformation. So in the physical world, you work on a material and you have introduced a plastic deformation. You have seen there is a permanent change in the dimension of the material. You calculate the stress that is required to bring about this permanent change, and you relate it to the theoretical stress which you arrived or which you derived by considering the plastic deformation as the shift in the atom from one stable position to another. Then there is a significant difference in these values, and the only place wherein you could get the theoretical value that is close to the physical value is when you have a system that is devoid of any defect, that is of single crystalline nature. So considering that the application of such a material which is single crystal and devoid of any defect is rather limited, the plastic deformation in all the other materials that we use in our plastic deformation is then governed by a different phenomena. So this is what this disparity in the theoretical value and the physical value tells us. So this difference in the theoretical value and the physical value tells us that the plastic deformation cannot be defined simply, or it is not largely governed by the atom moving from one position to another stable position uniformly. So therefore, the material that we use in the physical world, or for most application or almost all application, the plastic deformation, it occurs in a different manner. So it disturbs the crystalline arrangement, but it does not disturb it uniformly. So once you have a disturbance in a crystalline arrangement of the material or crystalline arrangement of the atoms through any stress or to any external condition, we refer to that as the defects. So what this means is that there is a shift in the atoms and it is a localized shift. It is not a uniform shift. Had it been a uniform shift, there would be a closeness between the theoretical and the physical value. But what we see is the localized shift in the position of the atoms, meaning your position of the atoms does not move in this uniform manner, but there is a localized shift in the position of the atoms. So this means the local arrangement of the atoms is disturbed, and which means that your plastic deformation is governed by some form of the defects. So in the material that we use in the day-to-day application, the plastic deformation is then governed by some form of defects, and this defect is what we refer to as the dislocation. Now, you might have already been introduced to what a dislocation is or what are the different forms of the dislocation, and this all would have been done in the context of the stress that is imposed on the material. However, in these lectures, the way we have introduced the different forms of the defects are by considering the changes that they introduced in the regular arrangement of the atoms. If you could recollect, we introduced the vacancies by considering the regular arrangement of the atoms and how the vacancy would disturb it. The same approach we took for the interstitial defect and the same approach for the grain boundaries as well. And we also took the same approach for introducing stacking fault. Let us take the similar approach to introduce how to introduce the dislocation by talking about how a dislocation would bring about a change in the regular arrangement of the atoms. Now, when you talk about the changes that a dislocation would bring to the arrangement of the atoms, depending on these changes, we can classify the dislocation into two. So, one is the edge dislocation, the other is the screw dislocation. So, these disparities or these differences, they are classified or they are brought about by considering the difference this dislocation brings in the arrangement of the atoms. So, all dislocations, they do not bring same disparity or same change in the arrangement of the atom, they do not bring same shift in the arrangement of the atoms, and depending on how a particular set of dislocation brings the shift in the position or brings the change in the position of the atoms, we have classified them into edge and screw dislocation. We will consider these different forms of dislocation not in the way how these dislocations are introduced with respect to the mechanical stress, but in the way how the atomic positions are changed with respect to these different forms of dislocations. So, let us begin by considering the edge dislocation first. So, in order to do that, let us consider a representative arrangement of the atoms in a crystalline material, and this crystalline material, it follows a simple cubic arrangement of atoms. So, instead of showing the positions of the atoms, let us consider the unit cells of the simple cubic structure that is extended in different dimension. So, this here is a single unit cell and we have extended it through in all these dimensions. So, we have extended a single unit cell to in all the three dimensions, meaning we have now arrived at a representative arrangement of the material of atom in a material in this simple cubic crystal structure. So, we have considered one unit cell and we have extended it to all the three dimensions, and since when you extend one unit cell in all the three dimensions, you end up with the arrangement of the atoms in that particular crystal, and we have considered a simple cubic structure or simple cubic arrangement of atoms in the material. Now, it is important to note that we are largely focusing on the unit cell, not the position of the atoms here. So, we will be considering the position of the atoms, but in this representation we have not shown explicitly the atoms. So, each of these corners, they represent or they denote the position of the atoms or they signify the position of the atoms, but we have not explicitly shown the atoms as a half sphere, which we usually do. So, this is the representation of the crystalline arrangement that we observe in a simple cubic material. Now, let us assume that these lines here, which represent the bonds between two atoms. So, these lines here are the bonds between two atoms. So, they are flexible in nature. So, they are made, let us assume that they are made up of spring and they do not easily break. They can deform, they can change their shape, they can change their size. There can be a change in the angle between these the bonds that connect these two atoms. They do not break easily. So, let us assume that they are flexible in nature, or to put it simply, let us assume that they are made up of spring. So, now what we have assumed is, we have assumed a material with simple cubic crystal structure. We have represented that by considering a single unit cell that is extended in all the three dimensions, and now we have also assumed that the bonds between two atoms in this material, they are not very hard, they are flexible, they are made up of, so to speak, made up of some sort of a spring-like material. So, these are the assumptions that we have considered so far. So, in this crystalline arrangement of atoms, or in this particular crystalline material of simple cubic structure, let us assume a simple plane between the atoms. So, we have different atoms. So, we have atoms occupying these positions here, and between these positions or these atoms, or between this particular unit cell, let us assume a simple plane A, B, C, D. Now, what we want to do is, in this plane we would like to introduce a new set of atoms. So, we have already existing atoms in this unit cell, and in this particular plane we would like to introduce a new set of atoms. Now when we introduce the new set of atoms as it is here, what happens is that the interatomic spacing gets disturbed. So as it is, when we introduce the new atoms or new plane of atoms along A, B, C, D, then the interatomic spacing in this region gets disturbed. So in order to avoid that, what we do is, even after introducing the atoms along the plane A, B, C, D, we want to ensure that the interatomic spacing, which is the property of the material, remains unchanged. So when we do that, we arrive at a setup like this. So what we essentially have is, we have introduced the new plane of atoms along A, B, C and D, and the interatomic spacing, it remains constant. So these interatomic spacing, it is equal to the interatomic spacing between the existing atoms. So here we have the existing atoms, and this interatomic spacing is equal to the atom that is introduced by the new plane A, B, C, D. So under such a condition, if you could see that this new plane of atoms have introduced some sort of a distortion in the material. This has largely disturbed the regular arrangement of the atoms. Here you have a new plane of atoms that has preserved the interatomic spacing. However, when you consider this region here, you have some sort of a distortion that is being introduced. Here you have the interatomic spacing between the existing atoms that are largely disturbed. So this interatomic spacing is disturbed even though you have conserved the interatomic spacing in this region. So this is what we refer to as the edge dislocation. So what edge dislocation does is, it introduces an additional plane of atoms, and even though in some of the regions the additional, even despite the introduction of the additional plane of atoms, in some of the regions the interatomic spacing is preserved. However, in some other regions the interatomic spacing or the distortion is largely brought about, and this is what characterizes the edge dislocation. Now if you consider, or if you want to talk about the a specific region wherein the edge dislocation is introduced, you can discuss that in terms of this line CD. When you want to pinpoint where the core of this particular defect lies, or where is the central position of the particular defect lies, then that central position or the core of this particular defect lies in CD. The reason we call CD as the core or the line of this particular defect is because above this line, as you can see, the interatomic spacing is largely conserved. So it doesn't make a difference if you just talk in terms of the interatomic spacing. It doesn't make a difference if you are talking these 2 points here, or these 2 points here, or these 2 points here. The points I mean is the position of the atom. So above this line CD, when you talk exclusively in terms of the interatomic spacing, there is not much change. However, below it you have a significant disparity in the interatomic spacing. Whatever distortion you see, or whatever disparity is introduced in the regular arrangement of the atoms, is more pronounced below CD, or more pronounced below the line CD. When you consider just in terms of the interatomic spacing, it is more pronounced below CD than above CD. In case of above CD, the introduction despite the introduction of the new layer of atoms, the interatomic spacing remains conserved. However, below CD, what you observe is that the amount of distortion is dependent on the distance from CD, and this CD is what we refer to as the dislocation line, or just the dislocation. So the core of the dislocation, or the prominent layer of atoms or the prominent row of atoms that brings about the imperfection in the material in the context of the screw dislocation, or rather the edge dislocation, that is CD, is what we refer to as the dislocation line or the edge dislocation. Now it is important to note that here the added new layer of atoms is above the line CD, and the distortion that is dependent on the distance from the dislocation is below it. So this can be represented by a symbol like this. So what we have is, we have this line that is representative of CD here, and the new layer of atoms that are found above it are represented by a perpendicular line, and the distortions that is caused in the regular arrangement of the atom, so the disturbance that is caused in the regular arrangement of the atom, it is found below it, and the larger or the closer you move to this dislocation line, the larger you would see the distortion, and this is what we refer to as the positive edge dislocation. So what we have is, we have this symbol representing positive edge dislocation, and this positive edge dislocation does not imply all of this plane A, B, C, D, but it is largely focused on the line CD. This is primarily because the CD is the line with reference to which we will be able to quantify the distortion or the imperfection that we observe in the crystalline material. So it is not the whole of the plane A, B, C, D that is categorized as dislocation, it is CD that is, in this case, that is categorized as the positive edge dislocation. This is because if you consider the section of the material below CD, you would see that the distortion is dependent on the position of the atoms with respect to CD. So the more close you are to CD, the more imperfect your arrangement of the atoms would be. The more imperfect you would see the deviations from the regular arrangement of the atoms. When you move away from CD, the regular arrangement of the atoms is resumed. So the closer you are to CD, the more disturbed is your regular arrangement of the atoms. The away you are from CD, you will be close to the regular crystalline arrangement in the material. So CD is the line, or CD is the imperfection that distinguishes the arrangement of the atoms, that distinguishes the distortion in the material, and therefore this CD is what is referred to as the dislocation, and in this case it is positive edge dislocation. Supposing we have similar arrangement and we talk or focus in terms of the line of atoms or the row of atoms, and the distortion is above this row of atoms, and you have a plane that is plane of atoms that is below this row of atoms. Supposing you have your CD and the row of atoms or the plane of atoms are below it and the distortions are above it. You would have a distortion that is similar to here. You have the distortion instead of below, you have the distortion above, and the extra plane of atoms are below the CD. Then in that case, you refer to this CD as negative edge dislocation, and in this case the plane of atoms are below CD and the distortion is above it. So the dislocation, when we talk about dislocation, it is largely introduced by a plane of atoms. However, it is a single row or a single line of atoms, we call that, or we designate that as the dislocation, and this dislocation can be, particularly in case of edge dislocation, this can be positive or negative depending on where you find the extra plane of atoms. if with respect to this line dislocation, with respect to this edge dislocation, if the extra plane of atoms, if they are found above this line, then we refer to that as the positive edge dislocation. If it is found below this line, we refer to that as the negative edge dislocation. It is important to note that the dislocation, they are line defect, and this line defect is largely based on, or we quantify this line defect largely based on this row of atoms that is along CD here. This is because this is this CD that brings about the distortion in the regular arrangement of the atoms. If you consider just, or if you quantify the imperfection in terms of the interatomic spacing along above CD, the extra layer of atoms, they do not bring any sort of imperfection, because we have defined the imperfection as the interatomic spacing. If we do that, the extra layer of atoms above CD, they do not bring about any imperfection. However, below CD, there is a distortion, there is a significant difference or disparity in the interatomic spacing, meaning your regular arrangement of atoms is disturbed below CD. So therefore, it is the CD that we refer to as the edge dislocation. And when with respect to CD, when you have the extra layer of atoms above it, we refer to that as the positive edge dislocation. When you have the extra layer of atoms below it, we refer to it as the negative dislocation. And it is important to note that when we talk about the difference in the interatomic spacing that is brought about by the dislocation, when the closer you are to this line CD, the closer you are to the edge dislocation, the more distortion you would observe, and the larger you move away from this line dislocation, or the larger you move away from this edge dislocation CD, you will be getting back to the regular arrangement of the atoms. So these are the way we classify the edge dislocation. So two critical things. One is the edge dislocation is a line dislocation. It is a part of the dislocation as a whole is a line dislocation. And in case of the edge dislocation, the line that we consider, it depends on the distortion that it brings about to the overall arrangement of the atoms, particularly in terms of the interatomic spacing. So in case of positive edge dislocation, even though the extra layer of atoms is found above this particular line, the distortion is largely observable below this line CD. So in positive edge dislocation, the extra layer of atom is above it. However, the distortion, the difference in the interatomic spacing is below it. And the same or the exact opposite is what you will observe in the negative edge dislocation. The extra layer of atoms will be found below the row of atoms CD. However, the distortion will be found above it. So these are the characterizing features of the edge dislocation. You would have an extra layer of atoms, and in the above the edge dislocation with the extra layer of atoms, there is not much change in the interatomic spacing. However, below it you have a change in the interatomic spacing, and this change in the interatomic spacing, or this change in the, or this amount of imperfection, it is dependent on how close you are to the dislocation or edge dislocation CD. So let us now consider the other form of the dislocation, which we refer to as the screw dislocation. And for that we will consider the similar setup. We will consider the unit cell that has been extended in all the three dimensions. And this unit cell, it represents the crystalline material with simple cubic arrangement. Now we saw that edge dislocation involves the introduction of an extra layer of atom that largely does not change the interatomic spacing above the edge dislocation. Now what we have in screw dislocation is that we are cutting and translating, or we are cutting and shifting a huge or a layer of atoms which can be translated as the unit cell. So what essentially we are doing in case of a screw dislocation is we are slicing these particular layers of atom, or these particular section of the unit cell, and then we are shifting it to a different position. So this is what characterizes the screw dislocation. So unlike edge dislocation, wherein you just have to introduce an extra layer of atom. In case of screw dislocation, you are cutting a equivalent layers of atom, or you are cutting certain regions of the unit cells, and then you are transporting them and then placing them in a different region, and this is what we refer to as the screw dislocation. And if you could recollect the screw, in case of the screw dislocation, when you take up a line, particular line, something like this, which remains unperturbed despite the shifting or the cutting and shifting of the unit cell, this particular line remains independent, or it remains unperturbed, and this is what we refer to as the screw dislocation or the dislocation line. So the whole of this term, even though the disparity that is brought about, or the change in the regular arrangement of the atoms is categorized, or it is defined by this whole arrangement of cutting or slicing these particular section of the unit cell and transporting it to the different region, even though all these are used to describe the screw dislocation, all these happens around this particular line CD, and this is what is referred to as the screw dislocation. So this row of atom which remains independent despite the change in the overall atomic position is what we refer to as the screw dislocation. So we have a line representing the edge dislocation, we have a line representing the screw dislocation. So whatever happens around this particular line CD, and in case of edge dislocation we have an introduction of the extra layer of atoms. In case of screw dislocation, what essentially happens is, when you talk independent of the introduction of the stress, when you talk just the shift in the atomic position, what happens is that you have a shift, a slicing of certain sections of the unit cell and their positioning in a different region, and this all happens around this line CD, and this is what we refer to as the screw dislocation. Now if you move around the CD, if you could recollect this, you would have already seen in the, or you would have already learned in the previous years as well. So if you move around this particular line CD, or this around the screw dislocation, you take a path around it, what you would observe is that this path would form a single surface helicoid. The path that you take around the screw dislocation, will be of this form, that is single surface helicoid, which is nothing but a spiral staircase. So this is your line, or that represents the screw dislocation, that is CD, and when you take up a path around this and you want to move along the atomic positions, you would end up following a spiral staircase path, and this is in technical term referred to as the single surface helicoid. Now when the path that you take is of clockwise in nature, then we refer to that as the right-handed screw dislocation. And the path that you take is it is in anti-clockwise in nature, then we call it as the left-handed screw dislocation. So essentially what happens in the screw dislocation is, you are slicing a section of the unit cell, you are slicing a section of the arrangement of the atoms, and then repositioning it elsewhere, and when you reposition it, you are doing it with respect to a single line, or a single line in the atomic arrangements, it remains undisturbed, and this is what we refer to as the screw dislocation. And when you take a path to reach from the one point or one end of the screw dislocation to another end of the screw dislocation, you end up taking a spiral staircase path or a single surface helicoid path, and when the path you take is clockwise in nature, then this path or this dislocation is referred to as the right-handed screw dislocation. If it is anti-clockwise in nature, we refer to it as the left-handed screw dislocation. So we have introduced what an edge dislocation and a screw dislocation is, not in the context of how these arrangement of atoms are arrived in the under the condition of a mechanical stress. We did not talk anything about the mechanical stress here. We just saw how the change in the arrangement of the atoms is brought about by the introduction of the dislocation. In case of the edge dislocation, what we have is introduction of the extra layers of the atoms. Despite the introduction of the extra layers of atoms, in case of positive edge dislocation, above the dislocation, the interatomic spacing remains the same. However, the distortions are largely confined to the region below the positive edge dislocation. The same or the exact opposite happens in the negative edge dislocation case, where the extra layer of atoms is introduced below the edge dislocation that is represented by a line, and the distortion is brought above it. And in case of screw dislocation, the way that we observe or change in the arrangement of the atoms is by considering or slicing some portion of the unit cell and then repositioning it elsewhere. And this repositioning and then slicing happens along the line CD, and this line is referred to as the screw dislocation. And when you move around this dislocation line CD, then you would observe that you are taking a spiral or a spiral staircase path, which is referred to as the single surface helicoid. And when the path that you take is clockwise, then we refer to that as the single screw right-handed screw dislocation. If it is anti-clockwise, we refer to as the left-handed screw dislocation. Now, these are the distortion in the general sense that is brought about by the dislocations in the arrangement of the atoms. So, in case of the distortion or the imperfection that is brought about by the edge dislocation is significantly different from that of the imperfections that is brought about by the screw dislocation. However, even though there is a difference in the imperfections that is brought about in edge and screw dislocation, it is important to note that these all occur with reference to a single line, and this single line is what we refer to as the dislocation, and this is why we classify the dislocation as the line defect. So whatever imperfection or whatever change in the arrangement of the atoms that you observe with respect to the dislocation, it is observed with respect to a line, and this line is what we refer to as the dislocation, and that is therefore we classified the dislocation as the line defect. So having introduced the different forms of dislocation, let us see how we can quantify the imperfection that these dislocation introduce in the regular arrangement of the atoms. Since the different dislocations, they introduce the imperfections or the defects in the arrangement of the atoms in the different manner, even though the way to quantify or the approach that we take to quantify the amount of imperfection introduced by a specific dislocation might be similar, the amount of distortion that is introduced by the different forms of the dislocation will be different. So what we will be doing is we will be trying to quantify the distortions or the change in the regular arrangement of the atoms that is brought about by the dislocation. We will be taking a specific approach, and even though this approach is going to be same for edge and the screw dislocation, the results that it yields, the amount of distortions that it quantifies will be different for edge and the screw dislocation, because in case of edge and the screw dislocation, the disturbance that is brought about in the regular arrangement of the atoms is different. Now, in order to quantify, let us begin by considering what we refer to as the Berger circuit. So, the rather understandable way of quantifying the distortions that is brought about by the dislocation or the change in the arrangement of atoms that is brought about by the dislocation can be achieved by the Berger circuits. Now, in order to construct this Berger circuit, or how these Berger circuits are constructed, in order to analyze that, let us consider a two-dimensional representation of the edge dislocation. Now, this is nothing but the two-dimensional representation of the edge dislocation, which we saw in the earlier part of this lecture, wherein we consider a 3-dimensional extension of the unit cell, it is just a 2-dimensional representation of the edge dislocation. Now we talk about the edge dislocation with respect to a particular row of atoms, and this is the dislocation line, and with respect to this we define the edge dislocation. When the extra layer of atoms are above this particular row of atoms, we refer to that as the positive edge dislocation, and the distortions with respect to this line and particularly the distance from this line will be found below it. Now what we see here is the positive edge dislocation, and the dislocation line is towards us, is pointing towards us. You have the extra layer of atoms that can be highlighted in red, and the distortion with respect to the distance with this line or the dislocation line here, which is represented by the point because the line is pointing towards us. Now we want to construct a Berger circuit in order to quantify the distortion that is brought about or change in the regular arrangement of the atoms that is brought about by the edge dislocation. In order to do that, we built this Berger circuit, and as you can see, the Berger circuit that is highlighted in green follows this particular path MNOPQ. So it follows this particular path MNOP and PQ. So this is what the Berger circuit is, and Q and M, they coincide. So in order to construct a Berger circuit that helps us quantify the amount of distortion, the amount of imperfection that is introduced by the edge dislocation, positive edge dislocation, we are constructing this Berger circuit. It is starting from point M, and we are taking a path along a specific direction, and we are moving atom to atom. So each of these corners, each of these points, they represent an atom. Let me highlight it in black. So each of these points, they represent an atom. So we are taking a movement that is atom to atom in a particular direction, and this is a system wherein you have a positive edge dislocation. So we have a specific, we are taking a specific direction, and we are moving atom to atom. So we are taking a specific direction or a path, and we are moving atom to atom, and both these features, they characterize the Berger circuit. And what we are taking is, we are taking a system, we are taking a Berger circuit in the system with a positive edge dislocation, and the dislocation line is pointing towards us. So when we take the Berger circuit, the starting point and the end point of the Berger circuit, they coincide with each other, and they completely close this particular circuit. Now we have seen how many positions or how many atoms to atoms movement we have made, and we have know the direction of this path. We know the directions of this path, and we now know how many movements between atoms to atoms we have taken. And now we want to use this Berger circuit, which is characterized by the specific direction and atom to atom movements. We know how many atom to atom movements we have made and in which directions we know that, and we want to plot the similar Berger circuit, the Berger circuit that is characterized by again a specific path and the number of atoms to atom movement. And this particular Berger circuit we want to plot in a different system which is devoid of any defect, which is perfect in nature. So we have plotted the Berger circuit for a system with a positive edge dislocation, and the same Berger vector we want to plot it, or this Berger circuit we want to plot it for a perfect system without any dislocation. And when you do that, what happens is the point Q and M, which initially coincide with one another, which had a good agreement, they coincided with one another, now they are displaced. And this displacement or this lack of a complete close or an exact closure of the Berger vector is what quantifies the imperfection brought about by the edge dislocation that we observe in this system. So we have a system 1 wherein we have a positive edge dislocation, and for that we have, for the system 1 we have a characteristic Berger circuit, and this characteristic Berger circuit, it is characterized by a specific path and a specific number of atoms to atoms movement. And when you take this particular Berger circuit and plot it in a system 2 which is devoid of any imperfection, the complete closure or an exact closure which is characterized by the coinciding points of Q and M is lost in system 2. There is a significant distance between Q and M. Now when you compare the Berger circuit of 1 and 2, there is the points Q and M, they do not coincide with each other, they have moved away. Now this lack of coincidence or this change in the circuit helps us understand, this change in the Berger circuit helps us understand the imperfection that is brought about by the particular dislocation in the regular arrangement of the atoms. And when you want to quantify, so Berger circuit just tells us when there is a lack of coincidence between Q and M, when the Q and M points, Q and M fails to overlap with one another, we know that there is a disturbance that is brought about by the edge dislocation in the regular arrangement of the atoms. Once there is no overlap between Q and M, we know that there is a disturbance in the regular arrangement of the atoms, or the edge dislocation has disturbed the regular arrangement of the atoms. Now we want to quantify how much disturbance as this particular edge dislocation has brought about. In order to do that, we have to introduce a vector that tells how much Q has moved away from the initial starting point. So for that, we are projecting, or we are considering a vector that talks about a direction that helps the Q, the end point of the Berger circuit, to move to its starting point. So that means this vector here that helps the point Q to move towards or to coincide with the starting point. So Q is the ending point of the Berger circuit and M is the starting point of the Berger circuit, and we want to have a vector that moves the ending point to its starting point in order to achieve the complete closed circuit or an exact closed circuit, and this vector is referred to as the Berger vector. So what Berger circuit does is, the Berger circuit just shows that a particular imperfection has brought a change in the regular arrangement of the atoms. So in case of Berger circuit, when you consider a system with a particular imperfection, in this case a positive edge dislocation, the starting and the ending point of the Berger circuit, they overlap with each other, they coincide with each other. Now you plot the same Berger vector that is characterized by a specific point and number of atoms to atoms movement, atom to atom movements, and you plot it in a near perfect or a perfect system without any imperfection. This circuit, it fails to exactly close, and the starting and the ending point of the Berger circuit, they do not coincide with each other, they do not overlap with each other. So this means that the imperfection in the system 1 has brought about a change in the regular arrangement of the atoms. So this is what Berger circuit tells us. Now we want to quantify the change. For that, we need to shift the end point of the Berger circuit to its beginning point or the point of origin, to its initial point. For that, you need to have a vector that talks about both the direction along which the end point should move in order to coincide with M. So the end point, that is Q, should move along a particular direction to coincide with M for a particular magnitude, and this is what we refer to as the Berger vector. So while Berger circuit tells us there has been a change in the, or there has been a disturbance that is introduced to the regular arrangement of the atoms, the Berger vector quantifies the change that is introduced in the regular arrangement of the atoms by a given imperfection, in this case a positive edge dislocation. So two things that are important to understand here is, one, the Berger circuit, when you draw it, it follows a specific path and it is atom to atom movement. So number of atom to atom movement is, it is both these, the specific path and number of atom to atom movements. It is what characterizes the Berger circuit, and it talks about the, or it tells if the existing imperfection has disturbed the regular arrangement of the atoms or not. And when you posit the same to, when you superimpose the same Berger vector, or when you construct the same Berger vector characterized by the direction or the path and the number of atom to atom jumps, then in case of the regular arrangement, or in case of the regular crystal, you would observe that the ending point of the Berger circuit and the starting point, they do not coincide with each other. And when you want to move the ending point, or when you want to move the ending point in such a way that it coincides with the point of origin of this Berger circuit, then the work vector, which means it includes the direction and the magnitude, the vector that helps the point Q, that is the ending point, to overlap with the point M, that is the point of beginning, is quantifies the amount of distortions that is brought about by this particular dislocation. And this is what we refer to as the Berger circuit and the Berger vector, and they help us in quantifying the distortion that is brought about by the edge dislocation. Now, even though in case of dislocation the distortion is dependent on the distance you are away from this dislocation line, we want to have a definite way to quantify it. We want to have an handleable way to quantify it. So Berger circuits and Berger vector helps us achieve that. So if you take a system as a whole and you consider a specific dislocation, the combination of Berger circuit and Berger vector help us understand how much of a distortion has this system experienced with respect to this particular, or due to this particular edge dislocation. Now, it is again important to note that the dislocation line is pointing towards us. Now let us consider the Berger circuit and the Berger vector for the screw dislocation. So again, in case of screw dislocation, the Berger circuit, it follows a specific path, it follows a specific direction, and the movement is atom to atom. So the way we characterize the Berger circuit remains the same for edge and the screw dislocation. So it follows a specific path and it is atom to atom movement. And now we have a path wherein the starting point and the ending point of the starting and the ending point of the Berger circuit coincide with each other in system 1, wherein you have a definite screw dislocation. In system 1 you have a screw dislocation and you have constructed a Berger circuit wherein the starting point and the ending point, they coincide with one another. And now this Berger circuit, which is characterized by a specific direction and number of atom to atom movements, when you superimpose or when you plot the same Berger circuit in the system 2, which is devoid of any such imperfection, any such screw dislocation, you see you need a vector that is to move the starting point or the ending point Q to that of the starting point M. So similarly, what we have seen in the edge dislocation case, we need a vector to ensure that the starting point and the ending point, the starting point M and the ending point Q, they coincide with each other. And this, in order to achieve this overlap, we need a vector, and that vector is referred to as the Berger vector. So the one critical point that we have to note is, with this I would like to wind the lecture up, is that here the Berger vector points along this direction. And if you could recollect, for the screw dislocation, the dislocation line is in this way. The dislocation line is the invariant line, this is the dislocation line, and the Berger vector is parallel to the dislocation line. So this, in case of screw dislocation, you have the dislocation line, that is the invariant line, and the Berger vector is parallel to this dislocation or screw dislocation line. However, when you consider here the dislocation line for the edge vector, is pointing towards us and the Berger vector is perpendicular to it. So therefore, in case of edge dislocation, the dislocation line and the Berger vector are perpendicular to each other. In case of screw dislocation, the dislocation line and the Berger vector are parallel to each other. So in the next lecture, we will try to build up on, or we will try to understand more of this Berger vector and try to see the relevance of dislocation in the plastic deformation. So let's see ourselves in the next lecture. Bye.